name's Grant Swartzwelder, President of OTA Environmental Solutions, and welcome to Oilfield Strong webinar, where we try to provide informative speakers on topics related to the oil industry. Today we have a fantastic one, Jason Modglin, who is president of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. They represent upwards to 2,600 different independent oil companies here in the state of Texas. So represents really the heartblood of the industry, I think. Has a fantastic background working with Commissioner Christy Craddock, Agriculture Secretary Todd Staples, Energy House Resources Chairman Drew Darby. So fantastic. The only thing I could see in your bio that looked a little suspect is that you went to UT, but that's might be my A&M bias coming in. And I've been told by my wife that now's not a good time to be talking about being an Aggie. Maybe that has to do with some football. And
no, 3 wins, nothing to brag about. Hopefully y'all can rack up a few more as the season closes out.
Well, we can hope that, or we're going to just be smoking a lot more marijuana in the locker room is what I've been hearing. So anyway, let's quickly move on to better subjects, because I just walked myself into a mess right there. But
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So first of all, I'd love for our viewers to understand what the Texas Alliance really does. There's, we're familiar with PPPA, in New Mexico oil and gas. There's a bunch of them, but tell me how you fit into this world and kind of why certain companies should belong to y'all, how y'all represent them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we ran into each other, was at PVPA's annual meeting there in Midland. And we work very closely with Ben and Michael and Stephen on some of the overlapping members that we have, as well as key issues that they have in the Permian that affect producers statewide. So the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers is actually a 91-year-old trade organization. We were based in Wichita Falls and Abilene for most of our life. And then in 2000, 2 oil and gas associations came together, merged, and formed the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, and ultimately moved their headquarters to Austin. And that's where I got involved with them. But those 2 kind of parent organizations were the North Texas Oil and Gas Association, started in 1930 there in Wichita Falls, and then the West Central Texas Oil and Gas Association that started a year later out of Abilene. And so that organization has really been advocating for producers, for mineral owners, in those 2 areas. And then, of course, in 2000, we started adding members in Houston and Fort Worth and San Antonio and parts in between. So we kind of take a macro perspective. We're only focused on independent producers, so the upstream space, and then look at issues statewide. So again, we work with PVPA, also with the Panhandle producers up there in Amarillo, but then have members in the Eagle Ford as well. So we kind of look at things a little bit differently than some of the other trade organizations out there that might have mineral owners as a part of their membership, or pipelines, or kind of downstream components that might just complicate how we look at policy.
Very good. Well, given that, it's your plate should be nice and full with everything that's going on with within the oil industry and with federal. So it's kind of like, where do we start? And possibly one of the things that seems to be the more recent area that's making attention is the Inflation Reduction Act and all the methane tax associated with that. We had Congressman Pfluger last time, and he was talking about trying to remove that, which should be challenging since he's in the minority. But can you kind of give us an idea of what's happening with that, and how that's, because it really looks like it's not going to hurt the big guys, it's not going to hurt the little guys, it's going to hurt all those in the middle. Is that right, or did read that?
That's probably right on the methane tax, although we really have a long way to go before we actually see text and how it's going to be implemented. The Inflation Reduction Act, very oddly named piece of legislation, because for all the amount of money that it spends, it really doesn't attack inflation until out years, 2024, 2025. When some of the good items, lowering prescription drug costs for Medicare, potentially, some changes there, but all of it is largely focused on kind of this grab bag that Senator Manchin and Senator Schumer negotiated, and then the agreement held that you have to pass it as is. So I think first off, our general inclination on this is that it was a missed opportunity. We very much liked that Senator Manchin was championing permit reform and really making sure that we can build more pipelines in the United States, that we can add to our port infrastructure, whether that's LNG terminals or export terminals, really addressing some of those long range kind of NEPA limitations that we have in this country. That would also help alternatives like wind and solar that need to be able to build transmission lines across state lines and have frankly been stymied by some of these permitting requirements. So we thought that really was a missed opportunity, not including that. He ultimately came back with a bill that was just a little too bland for everybody. Republicans could not get on board. And then the kind of progressive wing of the House balked and it would not go for it. So we're left with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it's a grab bag of spending, a pretty significant amount of spending on kind of wind and solar, batteries, EV technology, and then penalties. So there's a methane tax provision in there that will be applied to all segments of the industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream, with some performance metrics in there. But ultimately, it's going to raise the cost and the price of natural gas. We like to pride ourselves on efficiencies across the spectrum, but there will be an inevitable tax bill, and that will raise natural gas prices here in the United States. It's varied pretty considerably on what those cost estimates would be, because again, we're talking about out years that are dependent on the methane rule being implemented. And so we have yet to see EPA's methane rule, what that will look like. We're recording this on Halloween, and there was a good kind of story over the weekend from the Wall Street Journal guessing at what was going to be parts of the bill, but parts of the rule, but ultimately we haven't seen the final document, how that's going to impact producers of all size, what's going to be the requirements in that rule, and then ultimately how you will apply a tax bill if you are found out of compliance with that rule. And there's not many other mechanisms in either environmental regulation or in tax that are set up in similar ways.
And all this starts in 2024.
Yes, sir.
Got a little time, but I guess that gives them time to announce it, but then not a lot of time for operators to adjust to it.
Yep.
So they're almost having to predict to get their house in order.
That's right. And there will also be some grants as part of that, largely for monitoring technology. Certainly, that's really been where the industry has shined. The last several years, the environmental partnership, other types of consulting, Grant, I know you're in this space as well, of really doing some of the cameras, some of the evaluation on both ends of the line, so that you know where some of your efficiencies can be gained. Those are some great opportunities that really the industry has led on, and what our lament was in 2015 was that the rule was getting out ahead of this innovation and potentially stifling it. And so that's going to be our request with EPA. We'll probably have a very narrow comment period once they publish the rule, which is likely going to be in this next month. We know it'll be after the election. No big surprise there. But then this administration really likes to go into these these international treaty events, COP27 in Egypt, with something that they can hold. And so they will likely have a rule out somewhere between election day and the end of the month when that conference starts up. And we'll have about 60 days, through Thanksgiving and Christmas to get a comment back to EPA.
And so that it doesn't necessarily dovetail with Quad OB and Quad OC, but EPA is also looking at all of that to respond to as well. So there could be quite a
That's
few,
right.
And that seems pretty will have a big effect on, especially it seems like a lot of the companies that you represent, because of the smaller, and it really causes all that LDAR and all that other to really push deeper into the industry.
Yeah, we'll start to have quite a bit more engagement from the TCEQ and the Railroad Commission on that as they start to push out kind of the state rules. And so that's kind of the next thing to come, right? This will be the federal rulemaking, and then we'll see what the state needs to do to be compliant with the state implementation plan. And you've got very different, if you've got a rule that is dictating how to complete a well or produce that well, that's very much in the space of the Railroad Commission as opposed to anything that TCEQ is doing right now. Right. Certainly a lot of oil and gas activity is permitted by rule at TCEQ. This would potentially change that. And so a lot of things still need to be worked out, all the while, as you mentioned, we potentially have a tax bill due in 2024. So there's a lot of things coming together here in this next year. And with Congressman Pfluger being on previously, that potentially Congress is going to change hands here in a couple months. So it makes for quite a challenging dynamic, particularly for smaller producers, which is why it's so important that they're active with us or PBPA or somebody just paying attention to what's going on.
I had all these topics lined out, but then you just brought up one a second ago about permit reform. And clearly that got caught up in all the politics of Manchin, and, no one was going to reward him for what they perceive he did and all, but I know that was an effort. I hear from so many folks that emissions issues could be resolved or at least helped if there was more takeaway, more pipeline. And that instead of having to flare it, they could just push it into the pipeline. But that at the flip side, it's near impossible to get more pipelines out there.
Well, it's kind of it's complicated, right? The Permian is just rocketed back to record production levels. And so we're nearing capacity again, just as we were several years ago. And we need big pipeline investment into the Permian Basin to get that gas, that stranded gas out of there. There have been some exciting new consumers of that gas located in the Permian, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's some of these other manufacturing facilities that can burn a lot of gas. So that's an exciting solution to simply stranding that gas. But you're absolutely right. We need to build more pipelines, not only in this state, but in this country. We continue to have the Northeast held captive by LNG imports. And so, a few years ago, they were buying from Russia. Now they're getting it from South America, but simply because we don't have enough pipeline capacity to get into the Northeast when they're right on the doorstep of Marcellus.
And it's hard to predict federal government, federal policy, but do you really see any changes coming in that whole permitting situation to be able to increase pipeline, increase takeaway? It seems hard to imagine it.
I think so. I think you've got one, Republicans committed to it. The difficulty is going to be in what can they get the administration to sign. Part of the challenge with the Inflation Reduction Act is that it extended out the production tax credits for wind and solar much further than they typically were. You always had kind of a cliff, a 4-year, 5-year, 8-year period, where then at the end, everyone's sweating and they have to negotiate something. Now it's based on a saturation level that we'll probably never achieve, and so those tax credits have essentially been taken off the table. And so how do you get Republican Congress, a Democratic administration to come together on permitting reform? Maybe it's possible. They were able to do it on the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure package. And so, we could see something either in the lame duck or next year, really Republicans and Democrats come together and try to push for some permitting reform.
So all of this conversation we're having about federal regulation is all kind of right in the same time we're talking about needing to, we are increasing production. If you look at it from a macro side, security side, we need to continue to increase production. But how do you do that when regulation tends to stymie some of that?
Well, it's been great here in Texas. We've really returned back to 2019, the start of 2020 levels, both in terms of oil and natural gas. By year's end, we will probably have exceeded those record levels. And really, that's a phenomenal testament to producers across this state that, they're breaking 1972, 73 record production levels. We still don't see the rest of the country quite caught up to where we were. There's still that 1 million barrel deficit that it doesn't appear to be closing anytime soon. We don't have enough federal water production. We don't have enough production coming out of some of these western states like California and Colorado, where traditionally we've been able to rely on kind of steady production out of there. New Mexico has been good in the Permian, but not in other parts of the state. So here in Texas, really the challenges have been in steel, in completing wells. Operators have reported to us, but then to other companies and kind of reporting organizations that cost for services, but also for completions have driven up some 30%. There's also time delays as part of that. The Alliance is kind of unique in that we have a petroleum economist on staff. And so Carr Ingham out of Amarillo has done several steel surveys of producers and then forwarded those findings up to the federal government, where we're hoping that we can see some relief in terms of being able to import additional steel pipe into this country. Really, that's kind of a complicated bipartisan mess. President Trump, in hopes of kind of spurring on the domestic steel industry, imposed some pretty high tariffs, as well as these economic reviews to make sure that China in particular wasn't undercutting the domestic steel industry. And so those kind of two metrics, the tariffs and then the quotas, have really been a detriment to getting more steel into the country. It's resulted in projects simply not being able to get sped up. And so the request from the administration, go out, increase production, runs into a a physical limitation factor. There's simply not enough pipe in order to complete those wells and bring them onto production as quickly as they're wanting.
So is it the sense of your economists that you focus on steel, but clearly there's been issues with sand, there's issues with rigs or labor, but really you think that steel is kind of the head and shoulders, or is
Yeah, steel's kind of the one that you can't even pay more for, right? Because it's simply not there. Labor has been able to be addressed. Sand, once the mines kind of got started back up again, we started to see that. Rigs are going to be kind of a perpetual problem. We saw that several years ago where we saw some of these rotary rigs being disassembled. And so they, until we start to see big capital investment in that area, we're going to have challenges there, particularly for the amount of technology that producers are demanding out of those horizontal rigs. But, steel is just, it is a big limitation. It continues to be kind of the number one issue that we hear from producers, that they either can't find it or it's such a delay. Those pipe brokers are really running ragged right now, and the kind of recycled market has just it's gone. It's all been cleared out.
It's interesting. It's like, well, unfortunately, with the issues on steel, issues with flaring, and then issues with takeaway, it seems like one way you resolve some of that is just slow down drilling. You just don't drill as much, which kind of flies in the face of what producers want to do and what the country needs. But that's really the only way to address all of the above.
That's certainly some of the challenge right now. We've also seen, ducks be attacked as much as they can. And so we are starting to see more service companies and frac crews out there. Certainly they're commanding very high prices right now. And so hopefully that results in them being able to stand up additional crews. We also think there's an opportunity to really look at inactive or low producing wells here in the state, and find ways that if there are tax incentives or other types of incentives that the state can look at to bring those wells back into production, that maybe that's an opportunity to compete directly with new drills in the state. Again, it's kind of where your priority is. If we are in a kind of national emergency and a global emergency, which we think we are, that we are short of oil and natural gas, and we're going to be for quite a while, then the state really should take the priority to finding ways to increase production. The Texas House of Representatives had an interim charge on this. That came out to Midland a couple of weeks ago, and really started to take testimony from folks in the industry on how we can increase production. And so, again, it's Texas is the leader right now. We're exceeding record production levels. How are you remotely going to increase production? But if everything's on the table, there might be additional opportunities.
With the legislative session coming up, are you seeing specific proposals for that, or is it still kind of too early? And I'd say too early, it's 2 months away. So
yeah, so they'll start filing here in a couple of weeks. I think there will be proposals. There were a couple of good proposals last session to really expand some of the programs that attack inactive wells and really deal with the state managed well plugging program. All of those ideas are designed to attract more employees, attract more capital investment into the field. We think those are good things. Hopefully we'll see some more items. We continue to work with legislators and with interest groups, frankly, around the Capitol to see if there are additional opportunities. They are going to be flush with cash. I know you've heard that before, but I mean, they are sitting on a $27 billion surplus and trying to figure out how to return that to taxpayers, basically. And so a lot of it is going to be through some sort of property tax or sales tax reduction temporarily. But then are there ways that they can help industries in the state, capital intensive industries in the state, really continue to build and attract that type of investment to the state? Because frankly, we are competing with Louisiana and New Mexico and Oklahoma. And we certainly appreciate that our legislators on both sides of the aisle bring that approach to each session.
And so New Mexico has the same issue where they've got all this extra money. We have, quite a bit coming as well. And you think that will be more of a general, like on property tax than anything specific to the oil industry?
Yeah, the Governor Abbott right now is kind of campaigning on half of that coming back to taxpayers in the form of property tax relief. The property tax bill, as you know, is so large and growing every year. Throwing $13 billion at it will be very helpful for a year or two. But that growth is just is unbelievable. And so I think they'll come with a variety of different ways to help citizens. I've heard sales tax breaks. I've heard returns on your electricity bill, as a way to just push that money out quickly. Hopefully it doesn't result in kind of ongoing spending that then we get 2 years down the road. If we're in the middle of a recession, then they've got to figure out ways to make up the difference or cut elsewhere. And so hopefully that's not the approach that they're coming with, additional spending, but finding ways that they can either return it to taxpayers, return it to businesses that have paid it in, and not have kind of an ongoing commitment there. That always gets us concerned when there's additional straws put into the state's rainy day fund. As you know, that's made up of severance tax dollars, and it already goes to pay for roads, water, retired teachers, and those are all good and worthy expenditures. But what if we add additional things to it, parks and healthcare, and it just, the list can be never ending.
It goes against the whole idea of the rainy day, but
that's right.
Last topic I wanted to bring up, and Texas Alliance has done a good job of writing on various water issues. And that's one that, what was about 5-6 years ago with all the drilling and the drought, people were starting to worry about that. Then it started raining and drilling went down. But, you could argue that water and what we do with all the water, produced water, fresh water being used is kind of the unsung issue out there. I don't know how much water we're producing now. Someone was saying 2 barrels of water for every barrel of oil. That's 10 billion barrels plus.
That's right.
If you want to talk about a complicated issue, you got one here. So it's what's y'all's sense on how do we handle all this fresh water we're using that we need, produced water, recycling? It's a very complicated thing.
It is extremely complicated. My predecessor at the Alliance, John Tintera, a geologist, really took a couple hard whacks at this. The Alliance put out 2 white papers on produced water, the most recent being in 2019. And really, they had just some great numbers in there. They had interviewed several of the water midstream companies, as well as very large producers across the state, trying to get those estimates, and then ultimately continuing to advocate that the legislature and the Railroad Commission take a leadership role in this. I think Texas has been kind of going back and forth with New Mexico on really trying to find ways to utilize this water in a more beneficial use. Last session, we had some great leadership from Senator Perry out of Lubbock, really trying to get higher education involved in this space as well, in addition to oil and gas companies. Are there ways that we can identify certain streams for particular uses? Maybe that's not direct to potable drinking water, but perhaps it's on certain crops, perhaps it's on certain industrial uses. And so Texas Tech has done a really good job. We were happy to be part of that Produced Water Consortium there. And I know that will continue into this session with potentially some funding for pilot projects. You're absolutely right on the scale of the matter. Most of these oil and gas companies are in the water business. I mean, they're in the moving of liquids. And so finding ways that they can either dispose of that in the most environmentally safe way possible, or finding ways to recycle it, which there's a lot of recycling happening right now, particularly in the Permian, but other parts of the state. And then ultimately, is there some other beneficial use outside of that kind of closed loop that could benefit parts of the state that regularly experience drought, or that simply need added water resources? We're going to continue to add population to this state. Some 1,000 people plus continue to move to Texas every day. And so where is that water going to come from? I live in Central Texas, and we are extremely water challenged here, and there is zero oil and gas around. And so, some of those needs are going to have to be met with additional investment in technologies, and that probably includes recycling on the municipal level, efficiency gains, and I think oil and gas bringing that level of expertise can tremendously help the state, and so it's great to be able to have that positive story going in and talking to legislators. You remember several years ago, I guess it was 11 years ago, when the drought was occurring across the state, and oil and gas was some 1% of use. And really, it was a good opportunity to highlight what oil and gas was doing. At the time, you had several big companies start to announce, we're going to get completely off of fresh water. And so that leadership role that these Texas oil and gas companies were able to lead on was phenomenal. And it was phenomenal at the legislature. It was just a great feel-good story of finding different ways to crack that rock.
It's this next thought, there's kind of a pro and con to it, but a lot of, if you go and look at Railroad Commission, TCQ, you can see emissions and see data, but you can't see any data on water. How much is recycled, how much is produced, how much is disposed. And so the magnitude of the problem and it seems like if you could understand that problem in more granular form, you might be able to come up with solutions. But my sense is that getting folks who document that data is going to be a non-starter.
I do think they are getting better at that. We're moving away from the kind of annual totals and getting into more granular data in terms of the amount that's recycled, the amount that's put down whole. And so I think there will be additional opportunities to grow that. Part of it has been kind of an IT limitation, just based on the types of forms that we have as annual reporting. But there's starting to be a level of granularity that's pretty phenomenal there. And particularly some of these companies are tying executive compensation and other kind of internal dashboard metrics directly to these types of reports and metrics, because then they turn around and they report it to their investor community. And so that, again, that level of leadership is phenomenal. I appreciate that it's coming from the industry and not, from a regulator. I always think that moves quite a bit faster. And so we'll continue to kind of highlight those opportunities and report on them. And I think legislators are supportive of those efforts.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, I appreciate your time. Want to kind of keep it close to our 30-minute target. I think I went over because I was enjoying the conversation, but thank you for the input and wish you the very best.
Grant, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Jason, you're in Austin, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've got a little token that I'm going to send you to say thanks, but I didn't think you were in Wichita Falls based on your background, but just wanted to
well, thank you very much. It was great to chat with you, and look forward to tuning into your future conversations. That one with Vivek was pretty awesome.
Well, and have you ever heard of a guy named Michael Schellenberger?
Yes.
We just got him confirmed, and we're
great
on the date. We're going to well, I'm writing I'm pretty cheap, so I tend not to have to pay for. So I don't want to give you the wrong idea or the right idea, but he's I guess a different level, or he's whatever. But so PBPA and I are going to co-sponsor it, but only one of us.
That's great.
Only one of us is writing the check. So, but I think I don't know. Were you at Namoga?
No, I wasn't able to make it to Namoga, but we had Alex Epstein at our annual meeting, and
same type thing.
Those guys command a pretty penny, but they're phenomenal. I mean, Alex spent north of an hour with us, and
if you don't mind me asking,
I think people really enjoyed it.
Don't mind me asking, how much was Alex?
So his kind of day rate, I want to say, is 22,000. But then he has a nonprofit discount that we were able to utilize, and so he was closer to 17.
A little bit of a discount,
and that included travel and hotel and things of that nature.
Oh, he paid all that.
He paid for that. Yeah. So it really wasn't going to be that much more on top of that, but that was included in the rate. So
Michael was asking for 25 in person, and I don't know if because I was looking at more just a Zoom type deal, and he was asking for 3, and I got him off of that. But
we did Alex during the pandemic, and I want to say it was around that. I mean, it was I don't think it was much more than that.
Yeah, I've just decided I need to actually learn how to speak so I can do that, because I only need to give one of those talks a month and I'll be doing just fine. So I don't
I get contacted by guys all the time, say, hire me to speak at your next meeting, and I'm like, good for you. I mean, you got to cast the net pretty wide, but if you can command some of this, that's phenomenal.
And then somehow, I guess because of the meeting Michael, now I'm getting emails, and I guess you have to work on it because he's blasting out emails twice a week on some hot topic. And I assume he's writing these editorial-ish type things. And so I guess you have to kind of feed the beast to be relevant.
Oh, his Substack, yeah, he's pretty active, Schellenberger, yeah, and ran for governor out there, and so yeah, he's pretty active guy. I guess he was a reporter by background. Is that right? I know he was kind of an environmental activist, but I thought he maybe went to journalism school or something, because he kind of brings that approach to things.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that out before I do my Zoom with him. So,
well, good deal.
And then we
got great to talk to you.
We got Chuck Yates coming up in a couple of days on our.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, he's phenomenal. I went to Fuse last week.
Oh, did you? Okay, good.
Yeah, they actually put me on a Inflation Reduction Act panel, and so it was interesting. It was supposed to be me, a guy from DOE, and then a kind of financial analyst there in Houston that is very, pro wind, solar, and battery, and so I was going to be kind of the antagonist, and she was going to be the protagonist, and then DOE kind of right down the middle. Well, it ended up all the DOE guys got COVID, and so like they had to cancel. But there were a lot of former DOE guys there. They worked for Perry and stuff like that, and so they got up with us and kind of talked about, this is a new mission for DOE, and here's all the things that they're going to be working on. And then, I had my kind of negative and she had her positive, and it was kind of an interesting deal.
Makes for a good panel. Well, Jason, thanks. Always good visiting with you. Good to thank you for your time on this. And sorry, we're not paying you like we're paying Schellenberger, but I'll buy your lunch, or I'll send you this little token gift, and just imagine it gold plated. Okay.
Well, that's perfect. Grant, thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.